This meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 23 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today to undertake a study on Report 1, Just Transition to a Low Carbon Economy, of the 2022 report of the Commission on the Environment and Sustainable Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Compte tenu de la directive du Bureau.
Given the directive by the Board of Internal Economy of March 10, 2022, all those participating in the meeting in person must wear a mask, except the members when they are in their place during parliamentary deliberations. To guarantee the smooth running of the meeting, I'd like to give you a few rules. Before speaking, wait for me to appoint you. If you are participating by video conference, please be on mute when not speaking.
English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair.
For members who are there in person, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will do our best to maintain order, speaking order, and we thank you for your patience and understanding in this regard.
In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed their required connection test in advance of the meeting. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. From the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. DeMarco, Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, Ella DaCosta, Principal. From the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, Francis McGuire, President. From the Department of Employment and Social Development, Andrew Brown, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Skills and Employment Branch. Chris Bates, Director General, Apprenticeship and Sectoral Initiatives Directorate. From the Department of Natural Resources, John Hannaford, Deputy Minister. Molly Johnson, Assistant Deputy Minister. Ainsley Emerson, Acting Director General. From the Prairies Economic Development Canada, Dylan Jones, the Interim Deputy Minister. Justin Reamer, Assistant Deputy Minister, Alberta. Douglas Zielinski, Director General, Enterprise and Ecosystem. Mr. DeMarco, I'm going to start with you. You have the floor for 5 minutes, after which we'll hear from one person from each of the departments I just read out. Over to you, Mr. DeMarco, and thank you for joining us today.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. We're happy to appear before your committee this morning to discuss our report on the Just Transition to a Low Carbon Economy, which was tabled in the House of Commons on April 26th. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. With me today is Elsa DaCosta, the director who is responsible for the audit. Our audit focused on Natural Resources Canada, Employment and Social Development Canada, and 2 regional development agencies. This audit covered 2 related areas: Canada's preparedness for a just transition to a low-carbon economy, and Canada's support for coal workers and communities affected by the coal phase-out. Canada has committed to moving away from fossil fuel dependence toward a low-carbon economy that reaches net zero emissions by 2050. Canada also committed to what is called a just transition for the workers and communities affected by this economic shift. However, the government has been unprepared and slow off the mark. We found that as Canada shifts its focus to low-carbon alternatives, the government is not prepared to provide appropriate support to more than 50 communities and 170,000 workers in the fossil fuel sector. In 2019, the government identified Natural Resources Canada as the lead department to deliver just transition legislation. We found that the department took little action until 2021, and it did not have an implementation plan to address the significant economic shift. Without a proper just transition plan in place, the risks are comparable to what occurred with the collapse of the northern cod fishery in Atlantic Canada in the 1990s. In our 1993 audit, we found that the government was unprepared to deal with the consequences of the moratorium on cod fisheries on local communities and workers. Passons maintenant à l'élimination.
I would like to turn now to the coal phase-out. Burning coal to produce electricity has significantly contributed to greenhouse gas emissions. Phasing out coal is an early part of the government's plan to transition to a low-carbon economy. We found that without a coordinated federal approach to support a just transition, federal organizations relied on existing mechanisms such as social assistance programs. These fell short of achieving a just transition for coal workers and the communities they live in. As the coal phase-out is the first of several transitions to a low-carbon economy facing Canadian workers, communities, and governments, the federal government has an opportunity to learn from this experience to improve future policies and programs. The future will involve changes of a much larger scale than the coal phase-out. So it is essential for Canada to make up for lost time and ramp up its approach to a just transition. Our intent is to provide Parliament with useful information as the government works to meet some critical deadlines that it has set for itself. I trust that the findings and recommendations I have brought forward in this and in our other reports will help the government improve its performance in this area. Because climate change is an intergenerational crisis with a rapidly closing window for action, it is essential for Canada to translate its commitments and plans into action and results. Our future depends on it. I'd like to add that the departments and agencies agreed with all 5 of the recommendations in our report. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Very much for that. We're first going to hear from our other witnesses, but we will have opportunity for many questions. Turning now to Francis McGuire from ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the other members. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq, and Passamaquoddy people. I'm here to speak about the delivery of by ACOA of the Canada coal transition. ACOA, as you know, is the federal department charged with fueling the Atlantic economy. It works both with businesses and communities to build a strong and inclusive environment. ACOA was mandated to deliver $55 million under 2 programs to help 5 affected communities in terms of transition. The 5 communities include Belledune in Brunswick, Toronto, Trenton and Pictou County, Point Coney, Point Tupper, and Lingan in Nova Scotia. It's important to understand that the situation across the country can be very different. In fact, when we look at our 5 communities, the situations are different and we need to adapt to them. It is in New Brunswick and in Nova Scotia, there is no imminent shuttering of the coal generating facilities. Therefore, the labor transition is really not going to occur for another 5 or 6 years. Therefore, for us, focusing on the community adjustment rather than the labor force was timely. In our situation, the respective power companies are well equipped to redeploy employees to other higher skilled jobs and to look at things like early retirements and other measures. With that in mind, we were really focused on delivering on impacted communities and working with employers and working with them first to establish their priorities in terms of what they saw as a transition. This is consistent with the Just Transition recommendations to meet with the affected communities to learn about their local priorities and their local goals of developing and diversifying their economy. In Atlantic Canada, we are dealing, as I said, with community transition more than employee transition at this point. Cette approche à long terme a pour
This long-term approach aims to help the communities diversify and build up other sectors to make the most of their local assets, to grow the economy and create local employment. Once these are established, ACOA then engages with other government agencies as needed to address these needs. Establishing a program comes after community goals are set. Until now, ACOA has supported long-term large projects such as helping expand and upgrade port infrastructure in Belledune, the funding of a bioprocessing facility in Pictou, and supporting the growth of bioprocessing sector in Cape Breton. I would like to point out to committee members that all the projects supported by ACOA were developed in consultation with and in partnership with community leaders and employers. Through the two CCTI initiatives, ACOA has supported to date 32 projects with total investments of almost $24.6 million.
We've done in Cape Breton is finance the development of a company called Protocase, creating 50 jobs there. In New Brunswick with AGN Investment, developing a green certified building panel manufacturing facility that will use 100% recyclable material and creating over 140 jobs. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, the Canada Transition is helping communities one by one look at their prospects and developing things. We will continue to work and bring in other partners as necessary once these are identified. And I would use, for instance, the accelerator that was the community wanted to develop in Pictou County. We brought in people like InnovaCorp, Volta, NRC, et cetera, to bring the federal and provincial partners together to address those issues. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate being invited.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your opening statement. Turning now to Mr. Brown with the Department of Employment and Social Development. Over to you. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you and members of the committee. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Je vous remercie de m'avoir.
Thank you for the invitation to appear before the committee today and for this opportunity to discuss the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development's report on just transition to a low-carbon economy.
Employment and Social Development Canada, or ESDC, plays a key role in supporting a just transition for Canadians, including supporting Natural Resources Canada to develop just transition legislation and supporting Canadian workers, including equity-deserving groups, in gaining the skills they need for in-demand jobs in key sectors such as those being created by the transition to a cleaner economy. Nous comprenons l'importance.
We understand the importance of this audit, we agree with its recommendations, and we are currently taking steps to address the findings from the Office of the Auditor General.
Noted that the world is increasingly shifting to clean options. ESDC will continue to support sectors that have been hit hard by the pandemic by helping employers address labor shortages and giving people living in Canada the skills they need to find good jobs. Under the leadership of Natural Resources Canada, we've completed public consultations on the Just Transition legislation to seek feedback from a broad range of stakeholders, including workers, unions, employers, communities, provinces, and territories, as well as Indigenous groups. This valuable input will help us make informed and thoughtful decisions on just transition. As most of you already know, labor market pressures are affecting practically all sectors of the economy and most regions of the country. As of February of this year, there were more than 820,000 job vacancies across Canada, which is still significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels. Pour combler les
To address the labor shortages facing the Canadian economy, it will be necessary to maximize all sources of labor, but also capitalize on the opportunities presented by the transition to a low-carbon economy.
ESDC has a large suite of skills and employment programming and has taken concrete measures to help workers thrive in a low-carbon economy. For example, to help Canadians access training to meet the changing needs of industry and help employers retain and attract a skilled and diverse workforce, ESDC has recently completed a call for proposals for the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program. This new program will fund sectoral projects that focus on a range of industry-driven activities to help address labor market needs, with particular focus on building talent for the clean economy.
Maximizing workforce participation is also about accessing untapped labor pools and removing the barriers that restrict workforce participation.
Make our workforce more diverse and inclusive. Budget 2022 proposes to provide $115 million over 5 years, with $30 million ongoing, to expand the Foreign Credential Recognition Program and help 11,000 skilled newcomers per year get their credentials recognized. Their experience and talent will be needed in technology fields such as automation and digital innovation, which will play a key role in our transition to a low-carbon economy. In addition, Budget 2022 plans to double the amount of funding going to Union Training and Innovation Program to $84.2 million over 4 years, and this funding will help 3,500 apprentices from equity-deserving groups begin and succeed in careers in the Red Seal trades by providing targeted investments that are aimed at addressing barriers that limit participation in fields like the clean economy.
We recognize the important role the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development plays in holding the government to account on its environmental priorities. So I can assure you that ESDC will continue to work closely with Natural Resources Canada and all of its partners to support a green recovery that will create jobs, build a clean economy, and fight and protect against climate change. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to appear before you today.
I'll now end my opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Turning now to the Department of Natural Resources, Mr. Hannaford, it's good to see you. Over to you. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Oh, you're on. Oh, let me just. Mr. Hannaford, we can't hear you for some reason. Let's hold on a second and we'll try to figure out. I see you don't
may
appear
be
to...
computer muted.
Oh, could you be computer muted? We can't hear you. Just hold on. We'll just pause this for a second. I suspect the clerk is busy trying to work with our support team to sort this out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Victory. Sorry about that.
No trouble at all. So it's good to see you. I wasn't expecting you for a little further into the meeting, so it's nice you could join us spot on time. And I'll turn the floor over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for this opportunity. And I'd like to begin by recognizing that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. I'd also like to thank the Commissioner for the Environment and Sustainable Development for his audit of Just Transition, and I'm pleased to inform the Chair that Natural Resources Canada is working with other departments to execute a plan to fulfill his recommendations. This plan will complement the work that is underway to seize the economic opportunities of Canada's transition to net zero, particularly regarding jobs. The government's focus is on ensuring opportunities to create more jobs for workers and families in all regions of the country. Much of this work was not included in the audit because of its timing and scope. For example, the audit's timeframe included the pandemic outbreak, a time when Natural Resources Canada was focusing on helping resource companies and their workers face the impact of plunging commodity prices. We're now well into advancing just transition. For instance, on June 1st, the Minister of Natural Resources launched the Regional Energy and Resource Tables. This process will identify, prioritize, and pursue opportunities for economic growth and sustainable job creation in the energy and resources sectors across Canada. Through this process, the government will work with provinces and territories, Indigenous organizations, as well as industry, labor, and experts to develop growth strategies geared at the strengths of each region. A key part of this work will be to identify the skills and training needs required to ensure that Canada's labor force is poised to participate in the net zero economy of the future. In addition, Natural Resources Canada is investing in sustainable energy, mining, and forestry initiatives across the country. We are also supporting Indigenous peoples, communities, and businesses in their participation in Canada's net zero future. Meanwhile, regional agencies in Atlantic Canada and the Prairies continue to roll out and deliver the $185 million already committed to communities impacted by the accelerated phase-out of coal-fired electricity. This work is supporting local job creation and economic diversification in Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. As of April, the government had invested $75 million in 72 projects across these provinces. I should also mention the recent measures in the 2030 Emissions Reduction Plan and in Budget 2022. They include new investments in renewable power, green buildings and neighborhoods, critical minerals, and small modular reactors. I will turn now to the pending Just Transition legislation. Since last July, we have been consulting broadly, drawing on the expertise of the International Labour Organization to ensure social dialogue is at the core of Just Transition. The legislation will codify how the government puts people first, and that's why we're engaging broadly with workers and their communities, Indigenous partners, unions, employers, academics, and non-governmental organizations. We also open this discussion to anyone who wished to send us a written submission, and some 30,000 people have done so. My department will make public a What We Heard report to summarize these findings. And to stay on top of the entire Just Transition process, NRCan is working with other relevant federal entities to monitor, measure, and report on programs, and to inform parliamentarians and Canadians of the results achieved. This work is not static. Labour market trends will continue to evolve, and much depends on the pathways that Canada and the rest of the world take to reach net zero. These are decisions taken by everyone from CEOs to students and workers looking for opportunities in exciting and emerging fields. For these reasons, Just Transition doesn't have a set end date. It requires careful, coordinated, and proactive planning to ensure that Canadians have sustainable jobs well into the future. With that, I thank you for your time, and we welcome your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hannaford. And hearing from our last witness from the Prairies Economic Development Canada, Dylan Jones, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you and all the honorable members. Today, I'm joining you from near the Bow River. I'm in Calgary, Alberta, which is Treaty 7 territory, traditional lands of the Niitsitapi, and of course, part of the Métis homeland. So the phase out of coal-fired power production has been fairly high impact in Saskatchewan and Alberta. We're in that context, working quite hard to support affected communities and the people that live in those communities and rely on them. We are, our goal is that people and the places that they live in are not left behind as Canada moves to a net zero economy. We believe strongly in the concept of nothing about us without us. That's why Prairies Can staff spent countless hours at community meetings, municipal and band council meetings, worker transition meetings, and events, and talking one-on-one with community leaders, businesses, and workers. This people-centric approach puts workers and communities at the center of our policy and decision-making on climate change action. And that just makes sense. It makes sense to listen to the people that are affected by all of this. So Prairies Can is delivering $25 million under the Coal Transition Initiative and $105 million under the related infrastructure fund. That's a total of $130 million. Of this, Prairies Can has invested about half of that amount so far. We've funded 52 projects valued at almost $61 million in 17 coal-affected communities. These are proud towns like Coronach and Beanfate, Saskatchewan, that are working hard to keep families in those communities. These are not simple projects. Transition centers in places like the two that we set up in Castor, Alberta, are offering training programs and business development opportunities for laid-off workers. 2,400 people have attended programs like these across coal country. And to give that some perspective, we're looking at about 2,800 affected workers. It is a measure of new hope because we know it can be difficult to create and find new jobs in communities that relied on one high-paying industry. That's why our funding is also helping rural municipalities in places like Parkland County, Alberta, to align their land use services and create infrastructure to attract investors and other businesses with new possibilities to make up for their missing tax bases. This isn't the federal government acting alone. We have partners. These projects involve a wide array of proponents, including municipalities, unions, community futures, and other local development organizations. All are working to help communities to survive and prosper. The Just Transition Task Force recommended we create flexible funding for communities. That's been our focus. We now have a clear picture of what communities want to do. It only makes sense to also get more clear on how we measure performance in the future. And we thank the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development for this and other recommendations. I appreciated that the Commissioner acknowledged our work to engage local communities. Our aim has been that the people and communities impacted by the phase out have access to the programming they need. It's really that simple. Mr. Chair, through you to the committee members, I say that the intention of these programs is an important and good one, to support people affected by the move away from coal, to be fair, to be compassionate, to be hopeful. This is a work in progress. We have more to do. The team at Prairies Can has been working hard to engage communities. Ultimately, though, it will be the hard work, courage, and innovation of the people in these communities that will determine their futures. We need to be there, we need to listen to them, we need to be flexible, and we need to help how we can. And I'm proud that we have a good start on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to our first round of questioning from the members. First, it's Mr. Eric Duncan. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I think today I'll go off where I was going off last week, starting off as a point when we had the Auditor General here, of the conclusion of spending money is not a result. Saying you're spending X number of dollars to do something is not actually a result. It's the actual outcomes and changes that are being be affected and what we're not seeing. We saw that with several reports last week, and we're seeing that again in this report this week. We see the commissioner say things that the government, quote, committed to, but again, afterwards, the conclusions slow, unprepared, little action, missed deadline. And I think one of the things that was most concerning was the commissioner alluding to a collapse, quote unquote, similar to what has been seen in Canadian history and other comparable things. One of the frustrations, Mr. DeMarco, that I have is that particularly right now with the geopolitical situation in the world, is we talk about phasing out oil production, for an example, and a decrease and a lack of emphasis on that. We're seeing Canada's ability to be a leader on the world stage of supporting geopolitical partners in Asia and in Europe and in the United States with high gas prices and production, natural gas, and so forth. We're seeing world leaders, for example, news article out recently, Prime Minister Boris Johnson visits Saudi Arabia seeking more oil output. We're seeing the European Union banning Russian oil, rightfully so, but looking for other markets. And right now, the 27-block country relies on 25% of its oil. In one of the frustrating points, a recent article in the National Post, Joe Biden begs dictators for oil while Canada's energy industry remains hobbled, of where in Canada we have the ability to produce and export our natural resources at little to no cost to the Treasury. And again, we have a democratic country here that abides by the rule of law. We have strong environmental standards and I think good human rights standards when it comes to around the world. Mr. DeMarco, do you look at, when you, as you mentioned, this isn't climate change being an intergenerational challenge, it's also an international one as well, of where when Canada does A, country B could come in and fill in a gap of where it is. Do you track emissions of other targets? For example, when oil production is decreased in Canada, for an example, if a project in Iran or Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or China is undertaken, are you comparing what those emissions are going into the global emissions versus what it could have been done using clean, ethical Canadian oil?
So thank you for the question. I would like to add that we're getting an echo here. I'm just going to try again. Okay, looks like it's been rectified. Sorry about that. First, on your first point about outcomes versus outputs, completely agree. The Auditor General, Ms. Hogan, and I both wish to focus our performance audit work on value to Canadians in terms of are the outcomes that are being sought by the various federal government objectives being achieved, as opposed to are there just outputs being measured, such as money spent, as the example that you used. So I agree with you completely on that point. In terms of global emissions and the challenge of climate change, which is an international and an intergenerational challenge, as you mentioned, we have looked in our lessons learned report that this committee looked at a little earlier this session at some of these broader issues that you talk about, that this is a whole of society problem that needs to be looked at, not just in terms of Canadian emissions, but worldwide emissions. And that's why, for example, if we have an increase in production in one region and not in another, it may not necessarily result in a net increase because there may be a decrease somewhere else. So yes, absolutely, we are interested in that. The current geopolitical situation is needs to be addressed. The just transition that we're talking about in this report is of a longer term nature, 2030, 2050, and so on. And that, is happening, and the International Energy Agency is quite clear that transition will happen. But that doesn't mean that we have to ignore current realities. They need to be addressed as well. Canada's role as a G7 nation has been disproportionately poor, I would say, in terms of emission reductions. We're the only one since 1990 to have increased GHG emissions. So we do look at our performance in regards to others, while recognizing that there are important energy security and geopolitical situations that may drive shorter term changes that need to be looked at as well.
I appreciate that. And just in the interest, I would, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I go through and say Iran, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, China, and Russia, I would assume you don't have counterparts in those countries. I'm assuming they don't have commissioners of the environment and sustainable development that are looking at the same targets that you are. You don't have counterparts in any of those countries, do
you? We have counterparts to our office, the Office of the Auditor General, but we don't have counterparts in terms of a dedicated commissioner of the environment in those countries. That's correct.
I think that speaks to where I'm going at about where, looking at the global situation of projects A, B, C, and D, the list is endless on Canadian energy in our country being canceled and scrapped, thinking, oh, that's great, it's lowering emissions. It's not, because the demand is still there, and who's picking it up are countries that don't have a Mr. DeMarco, that don't have a commissioner.
Mr. Duncan, I'm afraid your time is not endless. It has come to an end. I will turn now to Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please. Over to you.
Okay. Welcome back, Commissioner DeMarco, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming today. Nice to see you, Mr. Morse, as well. This is a very timely audit as we strive to meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. We have a lot to do, and a just transition to those impacted workers and communities are important. My question is to Mr. Hannaford. The Commissioner found that the government did not adequately support workers and communities affected by the phase-out of coal-fired electricity. Where do you believe the gaps are, and how will this be addressed?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, we accept the recommendations of the Commissioner and welcome the analysis that is being done of this important evolving area of policy. The specific recommendations of the task force on coal are largely underway, and my colleagues from the regional agencies have highlighted some of the areas where investments have been made and investments will continue to be made as we evolve towards the phase out of coal-powered electricity. NRCan has been highlighting some of these areas of activity through our website, where we are reporting on projects that have been funded through the resources that have been allocated to that end. And I think it's important to highlight the work that is ongoing with respect to our overall work, with respect to the net zero economy. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we are launching now with each of the provinces a conversation that will focus our activities on areas where there are real opportunities for economic growth and economic development. And those areas of activities will provide ample employment opportunities over time. And so this is a critical piece in us having a plan to evolve our economy in a way that will benefit all regions of the country, ensure that a people-centric position is taken, but that is informed by the circumstances of each of the regions of the country and the opportunities that those circumstances present.
Reports timely enough in light of rising prices for gas and groceries?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I heard the beginning of the question.
Are these supports timely enough in light of rising prices for gas and groceries? I'm thinking of those impacted workers and communities and Canadians in general.
Yes, the government is obviously very conscious of rising prices and affordability generally. The process with respect to net zero and just transition is one that will evolve over time, in part based on the circumstances that we are dealing with, and those sorts of supports. Again, my colleagues from the regional agencies can provide more detailed analysis of the outputs that have been achieved, but these are looking at specific opportunities that are available at a community level to evolve towards the goals that we are seeking to achieve, and those will be partly reflective of the international environment in which we're operating, but also reflective of the objectives that we are setting together.
Thank you. My next question is to Mr. Brown. Underrepresented groups were not considered in the GPA. Plus, data collection and analysis is needed to reflect the diversity of workers and communities. What action has been taken to remedy this?
Thanks for the question. And so I think a couple of pieces to that. And so I can certainly speak to the role of ESDC and the sort of efforts that we are undertaking with respect to diversity groups in terms of skills and employment training. And I think one of the things is that we recognize that there are additional barriers to the full participation of Canadians coming from underrepresented groups. And so in terms of the work that we are undertaking right now and the supports that we are providing to workers, it is reflecting the desire to provide additional assistance and get them and help them in terms of supports to get involved. So first off, in terms of the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program, this was announced in Budget 2021 to help key sectors of the economy implement solutions to address their current and emerging workforce needs. And one of the features here is that to support equity-deserving groups by promoting a diverse and inclusive workforce and providing wraparound supports such as transportation, accommodations, and childcare costs to reduce barriers to participation. Another example would be the apprenticeship service, which helps to promote careers in the skilled trades and which will be investing $470 million beginning in 21-22 to provide targeted support to employers who hire apprentices. And with respect to this particular program, an additional $5,000 incentive is provided to eligible employers who hire an apprentice from an equity-deserving group. So these are a couple of the examples of where Employment and Social Development Canada is investing in underrepresented groups to help them to more fully participate in the labour market.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Yip. I'm afraid that is the time as well. Maintenant, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wish to salute my colleagues and our witnesses who are with us today. My first questions will be for the Commissioner, Mr. DeMarco. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being with us today. Mr. DeMarco, I'd like to hear you. The report you presented with your team is quite clear. The government has no plan, no official governance mechanism, did not consult the public population. There's no follow-up mechanism for the results. You set the table earlier. Since 1992, Canada increased its greenhouse gas emissions. It's the dunce in the classroom of G7 countries. I'm trying to see with you, how optimistic are you about the new objectives that the government has set, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% compared to 2005 and the zero carbon objective? Thank you for the question. In this kind of work, you have to be optimistic, so I want us to have a safe, secure planet for our children and future generations. So I'm optimistic in general. With regard to the plan, the new March 19 plan for reduction of GHGs, we have not completed an audit. We will look at that and analyze the plan to see whether it's sufficient to achieve the 2030 and 2050 objectives. I think everybody knows there are deficiencies in the plan when it comes to details. For example, the ceiling on greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas sector. I can tell you that we're going to look at this plan and analyze it. I think there are deficiencies. We can already see that, but I hope they'll fill in the details that are essential to achieve those 2030 and 2050 objectives. Thank you, Mr. DeMarco. I appreciate your optimism and I share it, but I'd like us to be a little more realistic. When it comes to realism, the government is lagging behind in implementing an 8-year-old plan. The next deadline is 2030. So I'd like for you to share how the government can implement a plan when it's already 8 years late. Well, I can't anticipate whether they'll achieve the targets. Personally, I'm optimistic. When I look at the curve from 1990 to today, we're unique in the G7 in having an uptick in GHGs rather than a reduction. So if we look at history, one can be pessimistic and realistic and say that Canada has not been successful in achieving any of its objectives and plans, and none of its international agreement targets. Rio or Kyoto or Paris. Maybe Paris. We'll see. Thank you, Mr. DeMarco. Look, the past shows us the future. I'm impatient to see your next audit. Mr. Hannaford, I know you haven't been in the department for a long time, only since January. I congratulate you on your appointment. I'd like to hear you about everything that happened with the Commissioner's audit and the lack of definition of government roles, no accountability. Who are the people responsible when they get a mandate from the government and don't have clear directives? Who are the people responsible for saying, well, this doesn't work? We know we need clear directives if we want to prepare some kind of legislation here.
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that the work that's been underway to address the issues that are addressed in the audit are multifaceted. We have established a governance structure pursuant to suggestions that have been made at both the Director General level and at the Director level in order to ensure that we have appropriate coordination and tracking of progress that has been made with respect to just transition. We have as well, as I mentioned, launched processes with at least 3 of the provinces right now with a plan to address in more detail the other provinces in the coming months. The intention there is, again, to further refine what it is that we collectively are seeking to achieve in order to advance towards our net zero objectives. All of this is also against the backdrop of our very detailed emissions reduction plan, which is subject to further elaboration, obviously, over the course of time.
Mr. Hannaford, I don't think you understood my question. Who are the people responsible? It's written in the audit report. We noted that the federal government had not established a governance structure, or roles or responsibility to guide federal departments to coordinate their efforts to have a just transition toward a low-carbon economy. That's 1.31 in the audit report. So, Mr. Hannaford, I understand you may not have been there at the time. Maybe somebody else can answer us. But when you say there's no defined roles, no governance roles, you must have a mandate from the government to prepare legislation. There was nothing defined. Who rang the alarm in your department and say this doesn't work? Thank you. I'm very sorry. I'll take a written answer, Mr. Chairman. You'll have another opportunity to ask questions as well.
You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to just welcome the new members of our committee. Thanks for being present today, and thank you to the witnesses who've provided testimony. This is probably the worst, in so many ways, audit that we've seen in this committee. 8 years, my colleague in previous just mentioned, this government has had to deal with what is a matter of our future. This is the biggest issue this generation will face. Literally, our children may not have a planet to live on. And that is a fact that we can't ignore. And the fact that some of my colleagues here are in denial about the reality of the deteriorating climate is disappointing. And the other reality is some of my other colleagues want to simply kill this plan by delay. And so is denial and delay, and it just seems like a liberal Tory same old story situation. We can't continue to do this. And my colleagues know that. Each and every one of my colleagues know that. I am from the province that hits them hardest. My family, I've talked to this committee before, people have made real sacrifices in order to make sure that they can survive in this environment, in this economy. And we're not even approaching some of the people that have the solutions to this. The unions were made mention in consultation. Some of this report that the commissioner mentions, there was barely any consultation. We've talked about that. There's been barely no consultation. I've spoken to the unions. They still haven't been engaged. Where are they at the table? They have some of the solutions to this. There's no federal implementation plan, no formal governance structure, no measuring and no monitoring system. Quote, overall, we found the Natural Resources Canada and Employment Social Development Canada were not prepared to support a just transition to a low-carbon economy for workers and communities. That is independent advice to this committee about the reality of this plan. How are Canadians supposed to have faith in that? You know, I see no one is taking this seriously around this room. We have a serious obligation to do this work on behalf of Canadians and to make sure that we can actually hit some of these targets. But it's very clear, you know, it was mentioned by my colleague previous, we haven't hit one of our targets since. No, not one of our international targets. That's shameful. This is a committee about accountability to a government commitment when the government's done so little. So little. Our own audit here displays that. Commissioner DeMarco, I sympathize and empathize with you in your role to remain optimistic. But how can Canadians remain optimistic with some of this very clear evidence that support towards a just transition is just not there? You know, even looking at some of our Prairie Economic Development Board, for example, they're being forced to utilize existing programs per your report to deliver a just transition framework that is never meant to do that. So no one is taking this seriously. The Natural Resource Deputy Minister who's here today mentioned consultations. 8 years? That we have to stop talking about this and start doing something. You know, I didn't want to hear that we're going to go around and make some more plans. The Energy Minister mentioned a big roundtable discussion. There is information here. The fact that our Auditor General's office has more information than Natural Resources, the lead department, is ridiculous. Canadians deserve so much better than this. Mr. DeMarco, in your advice here, is Natural Resources Canada even the appropriate department to be doing this? Or should Canadians look at instituting a different department or a different framework? Because the question I have is the system we have right now going to actually be successful?
Thank you for the question. So that's a policy choice of the government in terms of allocating mandates to various departments to implement domestic and international commitments. And this just transition commitment is both. There's a domestic commitment and a commitment arising from the opening words of the Paris Agreement from 2015. I share your concern that, you know, an international agreement that dates back to 7 years that included the notion of just transition has been in place, a Canadian commitment to that from day one in Paris in terms of Canada's signing that treaty or that agreement. I was surprised when we opened this file, and I think, you know, the question I had was, is that all there is? You know, 5-6 years after the commitment was made, no governance structure, no legislation, no implementation plan. I am pleased that the 4 organizations have clearly accepted all of our recommendations and committed to now getting things in gear, but I am disappointed that it takes, you know, us opening up an audit file for things to get moving again. You know, this department, in terms of Natural Resources Canada, was able to create from scratch the Emissions Reduction Fund without a criterion regarding job retention during the pandemic. It chose to put this file, the Just Transition file, aside during that period. And that's a choice it made, and that's why one of the reasons why they're behind in terms of implementing this very important commitment for Canadians, the affected communities, and the affected workers.
Mr. Desjardins, you have about 10 seconds, so it's a quick, brief statement, or you can.
Sure, I'll be very quick, Mr. Chair. Just I'll circle back on this to some of the other respondents, but thank you very much for that answer, Mr. DeMarco.
Thank you very much. Turning now to our second round, we have MP Bragdon, who is returning to this committee. Richard, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated, and it's good to be here again on the Public Accounts Committee. And thank you to all the witnesses who've shared today, and to each of my colleagues that are here. Allow me just, as a preface, to start with the proverbial "if a tree falls in the forest" statement. Here's a scenario for perhaps our Commissioner of the Environment to consider. If a tree falls in the forest in a jurisdiction where there is no replantation plan, where there's little to no regulation, where there is little to, I should say, less than adequate compensation for the work being done, and human rights violations are very high, or you can have the choice of harvesting that tree in a jurisdiction like Canada where there's reforestation likely to happen, where there's high-paying compensation and wages going to be provided to that particular worker or individual, and there's much more environmental regulation and oversight of that particular harvest. That same principle could apply to the energy sector as well. Is it better for us, as we know, was for tackling climate change and dealing with these issues? They are international in scope, and what happens in one jurisdiction obviously affects other jurisdictions. And would it not be better for we as Canadians to make sure that while the world is still largely dependent upon and looking for energy from reliable and safe places, that the jurisdictions under which the best environmental regulations are put in place, where the workers are properly compensated, and where we can get a good return on investment for the production of energy, would it not make more sense to make sure Canadians are employed and have opportunity for making good livelihoods and providing for their families rather than outsourcing those jobs to other jurisdictions that are far less regulated and do not have near the environmental regime in place that we have here in Canada? I think, to you, Mr. Commissioner, many Canadians are asking that question. They're wondering, why are we putting all the emphasis on shutting down our sectors or transitioning away from our resources while the world is still needing it and, in fact, increasingly demanding good, safe, reliable sources for their energy supply that's going to be needed for the foreseeable future? I think Canadians want answers to that question, and they would ask this committee and others to say, hold on just a second. Why won't we prioritize Canadian workers where we have some of the best regime under the environment in the world? So I put that to you, Mr. Commissioner. Are you seeing and hearing that feedback from Canadians as well with those types of concerns?
It's an absolutely legitimate concern and something that I share. I mean, we do not want to just do better than a regime driven by a dictator or with human rights abuses and so on. That's a pretty low bar. What we want to do is to do our part in terms of the international community in meeting what is the greatest challenge of our time, which is climate change. So you're right that we need to, at least until the transition is complete, we need to provide the energy necessary to sustain society and economies around the world. And it is preferable to do that in as sustainable a way as possible, but recognize that the amount of fossil fuels used to drive that energy doesn't have to be fixed. The International Energy Agency foresees a drop over the long term, and we're talking about the long term from 2030 to 2050, not just this year or next year. There is going to need to be a drop because the assimilative capacity of the atmosphere for all of these greenhouse gas emissions has already been reached in terms of the temperature, maintaining a stable temperature.
Thank
so
you,
we
Mr.
have to
Commissioner.
transition the energy sources, absolutely, and Canada is blessed with renewable and non-renewable sources of energy that it could use.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Just a quick question, pivoting to one of the landmark pieces that the government has brought in place and put in place, signature policies that they've implemented, which is the carbon tax, for example. And from what I understand, and you can help me with this, that right now we do not have any metric in place that we know of that we can measure how many megatons of carbon emissions have been reduced as a result of the implementation of the carbon tax. But we have heard from Canadians from coast to coast to coast that they are seeing the direct increased burden on their pocketbooks and their cost of living as a result of the carbon tax.
And Mr. Bragdon, I'm afraid you're going to have to come back to that for an answer, and I suspect you will. Turning now to Mr. Ragascados, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I've noticed our Conservative colleagues speak with passion here today, but I haven't heard much about what was achieved when the Conservatives were in power for nearly a decade in terms of just transition. We still have time here today, so maybe we'll hear more on that. But moving to Mr. DeMarco, and thank you for your work, sir. I just looking at the report, I think it's important to put Canadian policy on this in a context, in a global context, to be specific. Your report does give examples of the European Union, New Zealand, Scotland as well, in terms of governance structures that you point to that one assumes, I don't think it's written here exactly, but one assumes could be emulated by NRCan and ESDC. I will have a question on governance structures a bit later, but I just wanted to ask you, Mr. DeMarco, which countries are doing it well? Which countries are doing just transition well, in your view? Real models, real examples. Do we look to the European Union, New Zealand, Scotland? Are those the examples, or are there other countries that stand out?
So thank you for the question. You're referring to Exhibit 1.2 of our report, and we selected some examples on this particular part of the report related to governance structures. We used, as you mentioned, the European Union, New Zealand, and Scotland, because they have actual governance structures. They're taking it seriously, and they put in place a mechanism, and they put that mechanism in place, those mechanisms in place in a proactive manner without necessarily needing in Canada's example, an audit to get things moving in terms of the governance structure that's now being set up in response to our recommendations. So those would be examples. We didn't, obviously, with the scope of our audit, we couldn't look at every country to see all of them and rank them, but we did use those three examples of the European Union, New Zealand, and Scotland. That's fine. As ones that had proper governance structures in place.
Okay. One might assume also, and it's not just me talking here, looking at what some of the work that the OECD has done, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, of course, on just transition, pointing out that in terms of concrete policy action taken by democracies, the work only really began in 2015 with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the policy perspective taken by the International Labour Organization and the Paris Accord. So there has only been a few years for countries to put in place innovative policy to meet the need of a just transition. But I've limited time. I do want to go to NRCan and to ESDC on this issue of formalizing governance structures. It is one of the recommendations, the highlighted recommendations from this audit, developing an approach, governance structure exactly, is defined as developing an approach that recognizes the roles and responsibilities and accountabilities that each department would bring to the table to achieve a just transition in Canada. To representatives of both, how do you plan on making that happen? Any work in that direction that you envision? I think our committee would benefit from hearing that.
Well, maybe I'll start, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. As I mentioned, we have in place now a committee structure that derives from a deputy minister's implementation committee that relates to climate. So at both the Director General and the Director level, we now have a governance structure within the government. I'd also note that as part of the ongoing work with respect to potential legislation, we have been consulting very widely, including with unions, with a view to establishing some of the principles that should be guiding all policy development in this area and all the work that we will be doing, but also potentially creating an independent body to advise with respect to just transition, which will be another aspect of our overall approach to this.
Thank you very much. And from ESDC, if we could, in the remaining.
Sure, and to jump in there, as we mentioned before, agree with the recommendations from the Commissioner, and with respect to some of the governance, we are also, along with NRCan, establishing a committee under the structure of the DMs. This would be a director-level committee that will be established this month, and which will be looking at skills and employment programming that will be necessary in terms of continuing to support a just transition.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that is all your time. Turning now encore Mr. Blanchet.
Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'd like to get back to Mr. Hannaford to continue my question. Mr. Hannaford, I just want to understand. In your department, if you get a directive from the government and it's unclear and roles aren't defined, what do you do?
Thank you for the question. In this context, as I mentioned, we have now established a governance structure which transcends this department, includes other relevant parts of the government in order to ensure that we are responding to the recommendations that have been made by the Commissioner. That work continues, and as I also mentioned, the work that we are doing with respect to potential legislation will further refine some of the policy direction that will be given with respect to our elaboration of just transition, and we are also working with provinces and with multiple stakeholders with respect to more specific plans at the regional level.
Who are the people responsible for transmitting to the government that the mandates are not clear, there's no government structure, it's not well defined?
Thank you for the question. As I say, I think we have actually established a governance structure. So this is something that we continue to refine.
Allow me to interrupt you. My question is this. Who are the people who normally advise the government when there is no governance structure? I'm not talking about the audit necessarily. I'm talking about your department.
The department is responsible for what the department does. I am responsible for what the department does. We are elaborating now our strategy with respect to just transition, including its governance.
Okay. So is it the deputy minister who's responsible normally when directives are not clear coming from the government?
I'm not sure I understand the premise of the question. We have been pursuing a policy that is being elaborated over time. I am accountable for the actions of the department, and the department is pursuing now its strategies with respect to just transition and a strategy with respect to transition of our energy production and other aspects of natural resources.
Thank you, Mr. Hannaford. Mr. DeMarco, I'd like to go to you now. I quote in your report, we noted that the federal government had not established a government structure. Mr. Hannaford says the opposite. Who's right here? I think that during the audit period, there wasn't a government system. I'm really sorry. We have to stop. I have to cut you off there, but we'll get back to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. He'll have another turn.
Monsieur le Président.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'd like a written answer from the Commissioner, please.
Mr. DeMarco, the member's looking for a written answer, please. Thank you. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to just thank the witnesses again for your answers. And I want to now turn to the question of how much work is yet to be done in terms of where Canada is starting. One of my colleagues in previous mentioned our relationship in terms of data comparable to other countries that have governance structures, that are taking this seriously, as you said, that are doing the work within the government to make sure that they can actually hit their targets, particular targets to the international community. Where does Canada rank in terms of that, in terms of comparison to those other countries, in terms of where we're starting? They've already began a process of reducing their emissions. As you mentioned in previous, that during your opening remarks, Canada has increased our production of greenhouse gases. Where do we rank currently?
So in two of our recent audits, the hydrogen audit as well as two of our recent reports, the hydrogen audit and our lessons learned report, we did look at Canada's performance in relation to other G7 nations. We didn't look at all approximately 200 nations in the world, but we looked at our most close comparators, which are the G7 nations, and we are the worst in terms of our emissions graph from 1990 to now. From 1990 to 2020, with the new data that's just been released, Canada's emissions are up about 13%. All of the other G7 nations have had decreases in emissions. and some of them very significant, including European countries in the G7.
So is it fair to say that Canada's participation in the reduction of greenhouse gases is actually failing, given the fact that we've increased production and emissions?
Well, Canada has not participated in the reduction of greenhouse gases in terms of results. It's participated in the increase in greenhouse gases and greenhouse gas emissions since 1990. The other 6 G7 nations have participated in decreasing emissions.
I just have a few moments left. So in terms of making sure that we have the appropriate energy as a country, but also as a government to make sure that we can get to the targets that are set, it seems incumbent on the government that we actually have to act in many ways and set stronger standards than even previously set in order to make up the difference in terms of the backlog to actually get to the targets. Is that a fair comment?
Well, governments are often faced with a choice between what is easy and what is right, and we're now having to make a lot more difficult choices because governments have done what has been easy and not what has been right for the last.
Thank you very much. I actually meant to cut that off, but I was on mute. So, Mr. Gigerlet, you eked out a few extra seconds there. You're welcome to come back to it in your next round. Turning now to Mr. Duncan, you have 5 minutes for questions, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and an opportunity to continue on a few different things here. I will go to my colleague from the NDP's comments about denial and delay. We heard a lot of huff and puff there, a lot of righteous indignation about criticism from other parts. I would argue, and I'm saying here, that there's not a denial or a delay here. I think the questions to the Commissioner that I've been asking is the denial or the reality that we face in reducing emissions is an international challenge that we have to look at it in that context. Mr. DeMarco had asked in my opening round about whether we look at what production and what emissions are coming from other countries that I listed there that are filling the gap of where Canadian energy is not going. I'm very proud as a Canadian of our energy sector in this country, and particularly not only the workers, the frontline workers, making sure they're supported with paychecks here as opposed to other ones around the world. We live in denial if we think that when we cancel a project that it just won't happen elsewhere. We are seeing the reality of countries move or companies move to other countries that don't have the same focus. They don't have a commissioner such as yourself. They don't have that same emphasis on environmental targets. So we try to feel good here in Canada. We're losing good Canadian paychecks and jobs here, and they're going to countries and to companies around the world that don't give two hoots about what we're talking about here. So I do think living in denial is two things. One, acknowledging that when we scrap projects here in this country, that they just go away and the environment gets better. Your report confirms it does not, but also confirms that we're not tracking the decisions we're making in Canada and the impacts they're having on global emissions because they're going to other countries that don't have the same environmental standard, net zero, carbon capture, all these environmental aspects. And the reality is, for all that huff and puff, we are going to see the NDP tonight in a confidence vote for the next 3 years, vote with the Liberals, and again see very little change. And I'll just go into maybe to my question on this. It would be a question for Mr. Hannaford just to test this. The tone and the status quo of what I'm hearing here is just continuing. So the Commissioner referenced that the legislation to support workers was not available. It was supposed to be tabled in the fall. The one thing that was missing in the comments you made today was an actual timeline of when the legislation is going to be ready, when it's going to be tabled to come to Parliament. We heard beforehand consultations change, a process, all of these things. We see the damning report from the Commissioner. And in the response today, I frankly think we're getting the status quo of where there's no timelines, there's no plans to actually bring something forward, consultations, discussions, and so forth. We've known about the problem for years. Can you give a date of when the legislation will be tabled in Parliament to actually move support for workers forward? Just a date.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The International Labor Organization, which is one of the sources of expertise with respect to just transition, emphasizes the importance of engagement and social engagement with respect to development of policies. And we are taking that very seriously and are working as I say, through extensive consultation process. That will manifest itself then in a what we heard report in the fall with legislation to follow. But we want to make sure we get this right, and that is something that we are pursuing with vigor.
It will be tabled before we rise, September, October?
Our objective is to build off. I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. Our objective is to draw off of what the consultation process provides and to have legislation that will reflect the interests that best serve Canada, and that will happen in due course, and it is something that we are treating with as a priority.
Okay, didn't hear a date there or a time frame. That was an issue before, and there's still not one going forward. So I will note that the NDP will continue to be supporting the Liberals and confidence votes on this plan going forward. But the other thing I'd ask maybe the Commissioner on performance metrics in my time remaining, one of the things we just dealt with in the climate change report before was the federal government committed to reducing its emission targets from 40% to decreasing to 45%. The report noted that no measuring mechanism was actually implemented to measure the progress. Mr. DeMarco, when we talk about these measuring tools, can you confirm that you're still lacking even the ability to measure the progress or lack of progress being made when it comes to emissions reductions?
And I'll need a 10-second answer, please.
So we have several concerns with the government's ability to track emissions in a timely manner. We're still, we just received recently the 2020 data on emissions. We get financial information, quarterly from the government, and that's a big part of our office's work. We would like to see environmental information being made more timely, and that way we'd be able to track things more quickly and see what's working.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to pause for a second before I go to our next witness. Clerk, whenever someone answers a question who's on Zoom, we're getting a very loud kind of sound in our ears as if it's coming from the committee floor. I don't know if you're hearing the room there, but it's jarring, and I think it's very hard on the ears. And if you could have the technical team there try to clean that up. I've not noticed it before, although I don't do these meetings often remotely, but I can tell some of our witnesses are having trouble. Both it's jarring in the ear and it's interrupting their chain of thought. So if that could be cleaned up, please, I think it would be appreciated by everybody who's on the line. I see Mr. DeMarco nodding as well. I can tell it is impacting the answers from our witnesses. I'll turn now to Mr. Dong, and if there's anything, Clerk, that I need to see, just send me a text, and we'll suspend if we have to. But Mr. Dong, over to you. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I too want to thank the witnesses and welcome the new members joining us today. Before I ask questions, I just want to correct my NDP colleague. He said something in the previous rounds that we are killing the planet. We can't kill the planet. The planet will still be here. It's the next generations that we have to worry about, and he probably would agree with me. And that leads to my observation here today is what's fascinating. It's fascinating to talk about, what happened or less happened in the last 8 years. But what's even more fascinating is my conservative colleagues on this committee is talking about still having this policy debate. The Paris Agreement happened many years ago, and they recognized that the need for a just transition for workforce. The announcement in November 2016 listed here on the document, on the report, the federal government announced it will be amending its existing coal-fired electricity regulations to accelerate the phase-out of traditional coal-fired electricity in Canada. And I know predominantly 4 provinces are affected. And as I go through the report, I read that, Alberta and Saskatchewan, they're accelerating the phasing out of coal generation. And Nova Scotia and New Brunswick will be probably a few years before that kicks in, which makes me wonder, in terms of phasing out coal and transition of the workforce, which one is the horse, which one is the carriage, right? Because Because if it'll still for a few years for a certain province to phase out cogeneration, the workers are still there. I mean, I'm not arguing with the fact that we need to build a framework and have a governance structure to help these workers to transition, help these communities transition. They're very much included in the whole plan. And as I was going through the report, by the way, I just want to confirm with the commissioner, in the last 8 years, is this the first audit you've done on the just transition? Yes.
Yes, it is.
It's about programs, the co-transition programs delivers 68 projects to support communities in transition. Some of these, millions of dollars, funding distributed or dispersed are up to 87%. So my first question is to Mr. Hannaford. Can you talk a little bit about these co-transition programs? What are they? Where are these $25 million and then $10 million? Are they put in place to support the transition of workers?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. And as I mentioned I mentioned one of my earlier comments, we have highlighted some of the outcomes of the funding that has been provided through colleagues in the regional development agencies. And I think maybe I will turn to them for more detailed information with respect to some of those projects, and maybe turn to Mr. McGuire first.
If you don't mind sending us a written response, that would be good, because I also got a question on, like, I talked about the horse and carriage. ESDC won't have a very solid timeline if they don't know when a certain province is phasing out cogeneration, and the workforce will be affected. So what's the plan going forward? What's the timeline on working with the province to phase out cogeneration? Can you tell us one by one the 4 provinces?
Well, the overall objective in phasing out.
Just one second, Mr. Hannaford. Clerk, we're still getting that kind of shock whenever there is a response from a witness. So I'm going to suspend the meeting for a minute until this can be resolved, because it is jarring on the ear.
Chair, how much time do I have left?
I've paused you. Mr. Dom.
Okay.
Don't.
Right.
You got about 45, 50 seconds left. I'm not taking. Okay. I'm not eating into your time, but I do want this resolved if that can be done, or a solution. If we have to take a breath for 2 seconds before we begin, but just some instructions, clerk, would be helpful when you have an answer there. Mr. Dong, and there's 50 seconds remaining on the clock, Mr. Dong. So, Mr. Hannaford, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the commitment is to phase out coal-generated electricity by 2030. We are working with each of the provinces through a number of different tracks in order to achieve that objective. I could maybe turn to my colleague, Mr. McGuire, for a very quick description of how some of the projects are contributing to our overall objective, but in the interest of time, I will conclude my remark on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our case, again, we are not going to see any layoffs from the coal generating facilities for some time, 5 or 6 years. And in fact, we don't think there'll be any because the utilities, and we work closely with them, will seek to retain those people, redeploy them. There will be some early retirements as well. And so our issue, again, is not, so for instance, with ESDC, in this particular case, we haven't engaged as much as we have with other instances in government. We are developing long-term plans for each community. And I think I want to come back to our role is very micro. It is 5 strategies for 5 communities that are all different. They have all measurables. They all have distinct strategies that we've agreed to with the communities. And so at the micro level that we're working at, we are very much in touch and working with industries such as bioprocessing in Cape Breton that has, particularly since the COVID, and we're lucky we got started before COVID, real implications. And we've seen real successes in terms of attracting other monies into things. And this is tied to the labor force that's coming out of the Cape Breton University that works in this bioprocessing.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to pause it right there. Turning now to beginning our third round.
Before I pass on, yes. Can we ask for the plan and the micro plan for the 5 communities that Mr. McGuire just mentioned about later on in writing?
Yes, we're getting a thumbs up on that. So thank you very much. Our third now round, turning to Mr. Muse, you have the floor for 5 minutes, but I understand you might be shifting your time. Over to you.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. Thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. And I just like to start off with noting and reiterating what my colleague said right at the outset, that spending is not a result. And I want to specifically ask about training into skilled workers for, I know some of the comments made by Mr. Brown from ESDC. The reason for that is in my home province of Ontario, we phased coal out some years ago. Nuclear is an important part of the electricity generation going forward, and I know that there's incredible shortages in terms of skilled workers, whether that be boilermakers or lines people, et cetera, in order to help generate that electricity. And my observation would be that the Ontario government, under under the leadership of the Labour Minister, Monty McNaughton, there has done all the heavy lifting in terms of attracting workers to the skilled trades. And, in the references you made in your testimony to one federal program which was going to create, 3,500 skilled workers, that seems to be a snail's pace compared to what's going to be needed. In Ontario, it's been estimated that 1 in 5 jobs by 2025 will be in the skilled trades. So maybe you can comment on that, or there may be others in the regional development agencies that also have a perspective on that.
Great, and thanks for that question. So I think first off, would certainly say that, as I mentioned earlier, we're really experiencing across the country labor and skills shortages, which are certainly more acute in some areas than others. And we also recognize that further developing and further preparing Canadians to take jobs in the skilled trades is one of the key areas for Canada in terms of being able to meet our labor market needs. It's also an area where we work with provinces and territories. So this isn't something that we or they do alone in terms of helping people to get into the skilled trades. And I think it's also an area that's quite relevant with respect to just transition, because we know that over the coming years, there's going to be a lot of opportunities with respect to greener energy and greener, the sort of green economy, and that we need to help workers to acquire the skills to be successful in that new economy. And while some of those workers may come new workers, youth who are, just completing high school and or other education, it's also going to depend on people who are part of the workforce right now in terms of upskilling and reskilling to ensure that they have the skills to be successful in that area. Chris Bates is one of my colleagues and may be able to add a little bit further with respect to the skilled trades.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So just super quickly, the government, again, invests about $1 billion annually in the skilled trades, has made significant new investments over the past years, including the new apprenticeship service, as well as the most recent budget 2022 announcement to double the union training and innovation program. And as Andrew stated, we work very collaboratively with the PTs to implement these programs.
Okay. And I would just observe that the federal spending is not equaling results fast enough. But I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Bragdon, for the remainder of the time.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick follow-up question in regards to the carbon tax. We know it's a signature piece of legislation in regards to tackling climate change according to this government. But the results, we do not have, to my understanding, any metric through which we are measuring how many megatons of carbon emissions have actually been reduced as a result of the carbon tax. Is that correct, Mr. DeMarco? Yes or no? And then I have a follow-up real quick. So I don't believe we have a metric, do we?
Given the delay in the timing of information on emissions, we don't have real-time data to share with you. We have projections from the Parliamentary Budget Office as to how much they'll.
But I understand we don't have one, and this is since we're in a cost of living crisis in this country, and it is affecting our producers, our businesses, and our farmers, and we're hearing this repeatedly. The input costs keep soaring, the cost of groceries keeps going, cost of transportation. This is affecting the cost of living, and yet we do not have a metric through which we can yet measure whether any megatons of carbon have been removed from the environment as a result of the carbon tax. It's a punitive tax, ineffective overall, and I don't think Canadians are satisfied with what we're seeing so far, and the fact that we don't have a metric at this point to measure the reduction in carbon is quite substantive.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. I'm glad that was a statement and not a question because you were out of time. Turning to Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I too thank the witnesses for being here. I just want a gentle reminder. I've been on this committee a long time. This is a process committee, not a policy committee, and we're here. And I am actually delighted that we are studying a report from the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development, because that was our objective early on was to give some lift and also to add the kind of analysis that a public accounts committee can add to the conversation. We're not disputing whether or not we need to be fighting climate change. We are looking at the consequences and of the programs that the government has to put in place, and whether we're being effective in putting those programs in place. And the just transition is indeed a very key part of that. So I would like to address my questions. We heard a little bit from Mr. McGuire, but I'd like to hear from Mr. Jones from the Prairies Economic Development Canada. Please speak to us about what you're seeing on the ground, the kind of consultations that are going on. Do you feel that the work that is being done now by NRCan and ESDC is going to be helpful to your department?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, this new regime where you have to think before you speak is a blessing. So I will, I'm going to turn this question over to Justin Reamer, just because he's been, I think it's really a question about what we're hearing on the ground, and he's been most connected to that. But maybe I'll just say overall, communities are, really concerned and really seized of this and very passionate about finding solutions, and particularly solutions that don't involve their workers having to leave that community to go to another community to find work. But Justin, you may want to add to that.
Thanks, Dylan. And yeah, it is very true. There are concerned communities. We've been having consultations with them, the unions, the workers, the municipal leaders in those affected communities in Alberta and Saskatchewan for a few years now, as we deliver our programs, and have been investing in projects to maintain jobs in those communities, train up workers, assist workers in transitioning to new sectors and new employment. And we are starting to see some results of those investments. And we have invested in some infrastructure projects in those areas. In Alberta, it's anticipated that they will be fully off coal electric generation by next year. So the transition is underway. But we are seeing, because the economy is fairly high growth in Alberta and the prairies right now, that there is a good degree of employment opportunities, but it may not be in the communities where the coal electricity has been generated.
So please tell the committee, how does an agency like yours help workers? I think we're talking about very practical logistics, that the jobs that workers may be able to transition to are not in their community. Can you talk to us about the programs that may or may not exist to help workers, and what would you then suggest?
Sure. So we have a variety of programs. We have a coal transition program where we're working with the community based on municipal and community leadership to invest in things like worker training sites, things like industrial land development, or feasibility studies for irrigation, or other economic development opportunities that community has identified as a priority. We also have an infrastructure fund that invests in infrastructure needs for an identified community that is infected by the coal, in an effort to support investment attraction into that area. For instance, funding roads or other types of infrastructure that are going to address the infrastructure shortcomings of that area and appeal to investors to promote new industry development in those sectors. So a variety of, I'd say, micro-orientated economic development programs in communities to support economic growth in those regions and support the workers through entrepreneurship, business supports, and other types of identified training needs.
And thank you very much. I'm afraid that is all the time We're turning for Ms. Shanahan, turning now to Ms. Blanchette-Jonca. Vous avez
You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much. I'll go directly to Mr. DeMarco. I'd like to get back to my preceding question about the lack of governance, of a governance structure. I know that you've shed light on it. Mr. Hannaford said there's no problem in his department regarding governance. I'm trying to see, was there really a lack of governance within the different departments? Yes, thank you. There was a lack of a governance plan or a system during the audit period. You can ask Mr. Hannaford whether that was rectified since then, since the audit period of September 2021. That was when it was completed. What he's talking about may be something that happened after the audit period, but you can ask him directly. Mr. DeMarco, today we're here to talk about the audit, so we'll concentrate on that. I want to get in greater depth with you about the rigor of the government in implementing a committee for consultation, but unofficially. I'm trying to see with you whether this is not a dilettante approach. We have an unofficial consultation committee that issues recommendations. The government does not respect those recommendations. I'm also looking at what you say in the audit. There's nobody responsible. Within the working group or task force, there was a recommendation that the transition group be sponsored by a responsible minister. But there's nobody. Nobody's deciding on the roles and decisions. Nobody's accountable within the department. I'd like to hear from you, Mr. DeMarco, about the coordination of action under this plan. We have 30 seconds, please. Yes. We've noted that there were many deficiencies. There was no governance system. There was no legislation for just transition. There was no implementation plan. But I think that because they accepted our recommendations, that they will do those things. But during the audit period, yes, there were many deficiencies. There weren't many details under this program during the audit period. Thank you very much.
Desjardins, you have the floor now for 2.5 minutes, and this will be your last round.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to be very brief because I want to be able to share a few moments of my time, at least 1 minute and 15 seconds with Mike here. But I just wanted to thank the witnesses. Again, thank you for being present with us today in this really critical report. I just want to thank my friend from across the way here, Han, for correcting me, but I do at least agree that my statements have inspired discussion amongst this group, which I'm happy about. You know, my conservative colleagues as well got very excited to talk about climate change, which I never see. And so it's very exciting to see that we have agreement on some things. But I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, when they talk about a just transition, they talk about it including compensation, retraining, career support, job transfers, and pension bridging for affected workers. Similarly, the Task Force on Just Transition for Canadian Coal Power Workers, in their recommendations, which this audit noted have not been completed, talks about protecting pensions, talks about securing income supports, education and skills building, reemployment, and mobility. So my question for Mr. Hannaford, if you're in the midst of working on the legislation, can you confirm that these key items that are recommended by both third parties and a really critical task force will be part of the prosperous or just transition legislation?
Thank you for the question. And I'll turn to my colleague, Mr. Brown, on some of the details. But we certainly were very grateful for the advice that was provided by the task force and have taken note of the 10 recommendations that were contained in that. The legislation is intended as a series of principles that will guide our policy development with respect to just transition and potentially creation of an advisory body. On specific issues with respect to retirement benefits, I will turn to Mr. Brown.
We have about 30 seconds.
Great, and thanks for that question. So certainly we are looking very closely at what is coming out of the consultations with respect to just transition, and are looking very carefully at what would then be included in legislation. I guess what I would point out at the moment is that there are existing support programs that are in place to provide support to workers that are providing support right now. And similarly, with respect to the skills and employment programming, there are supports that are in place right now. What we are looking to do is take a look at how we can leverage those programs to provide supports to workers, and looking at where any adjustments may be necessary.
Thank you very much. We have two more members who will be asking questions. Turning now to Mr. Duncan, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Commissioner, maybe a bit of, as we wrap up the hearing today, a bit of an opportunity for self-reflection here on the spot about not only your report and your concerns that you outlined, but perhaps some of the responses we've heard from the various departments and leadership responsible for implementing some of your recommendations. You mentioned about in the section for support for workers not available during transition away from coal. The AG's report states on page 7, quote, past examples of economic transitions demonstrate that if these transitions are not properly planned, they can fail to support Canadian workers and communities. And you alluded in your opening of where there's been several examples in Canadian history where the government response was not timely enough to match the programs and the timeliness of the programs to support workers. You've outlined this in your report again. You've heard the response today from the Department from Natural Resources Canada about the legislation to support workers and what you're advocating for. Based on your report, in your recommendations, based on what you've heard today, are you confident that there's going to be a timely response in these supports as you've recommended?
So I guess my reflection on that, and thank you for the question, better late than never is I guess the best we can do now in terms of this file. I would have much preferred to see timely action, starting right with the commitment in 2015 and being ahead of the game. It doesn't help a worker in Alberta or Saskatchewan right now to say that we will be ready when it comes around to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick in 2030. We needed timely action, and we didn't have that.
Now, and Natural Resources Canada is in a consultation phase. So I want to get the reflection here. Our fun job on public accounts is to do a report on the report from your report. So I just want to get you on the record here. Not only we have your report, we have your recommendations, you've heard from, for example, Natural Resources Canada. Are you confident now, based on your recommendations, that they are going to implement and change course? Something different from the status quo is actually going to change to provide, again, looking out east and those programs that are coming. Do you have any better sense of confidence on what you've heard today that they're going to be any more prepared to deal with this than they were before?
I'm more confident than if they had rejected our recommendations, but I'm also aware of the history of this file that actions speak louder than words, and actions have been lacking in Canada on climate change and just transition and so on. I am very pleased that this committee is looking into these issues because they are not just environmental. They affect, as you know, economic and social aspects. So the more that this committee holds the government to account on these issues, the better off Canadians will be.
And I would argue they've been committed to for 8 years, still consulting in year 8, doing a consultation on this. So again, I'm not hearing that. I mean, you think it's good that we're studying this and talking about this, but you don't have any better confidence today than you did before your report was tabled on the ability. And I'll say this as a constructive, respectful comment. I never question the meaning or the efforts or the well-being or the interest of people in this or departments. It's their ability to actually deliver. But again, I'm not hearing from you a resounding confidence to say that the timelines will be met. You believe they're committed to, they mean well, but you're still not convinced that they're going to be able to meet the targets and the programs when they're actually needed to, particularly as we move out east and some of those transitions from coal.
Going back to your first comment, I'll be confident when I see the results. Good intentions are not enough.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yeah, so this has been a report that largely looks at actions that haven't happened over the past number of years. So I think at this point, like, it's too late to do what we should have done before. Now we need to focus on what we're doing going forward. Prior to being elected last fall, I was chair of a workforce planning board for Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and we focused a lot on retooling the workforce for the jobs of the future. And it seems to me that that's really where our focus needs to be in the subject of this whole report. So I'm going to address this question to Mr. Brown. Budget 2022 proposed a federal measure to support mid-career workers navigating the transition to the 21st century. Can you please tell us a little bit more about that?
Great, and thanks very much for that question. So again, in terms of that area of upskilling, reskilling, and your specific question with respect to the Budget 2022 commitment, I think that what I could say specifically with respect to providing support to mid-career workers is that there is work that we are continuing within the department to develop very specific proposals for that. We're also using some of the programs that I've mentioned already. So for example, the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program. This is one where, again, we're looking at people and looking at how we can provide them with the skills to be successful, specifically with the transition to a low carbon economy. I think also staying on the theme of mid-career workers, there was also a commitment in Budget 2022 with respect to working with provinces and territories with respect to the labor market development agreements and the workforce development agreements. As you may know, these are the funding arrangements that we have with provinces and territories that represent about $3 billion annually in training spending. And these provide supports to more than 1 million individuals across the country each year. So this is one of the areas as well where the federal government would like to make mid-career workers a priority. And I think the other things that we're also doing there, the Government of Canada committed to launch a Clean Jobs Training Centre to help workers across sectors upgrade or gain new skills so as to be on the leading edge of the zero carbon industry. And this again, is one of the things where we have been leveraging the consultations with respect to just transition to help inform the way that we would intend to take forward the Clean Jobs Training Centre. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. That's terrific. In fact, you addressed my next question was about the Clean Jobs Training Centre. I know I don't have very much time. I just had a quick question for Mr. Hannaford, if you could. You did refer to the consultation process that you've been involved in, and you made reference to that What We've Heard report will be coming forward. Can you quickly tell us when we might expect to see that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the fall.
Great. Okay, I think that's probably all the questions I have then. I think we're getting pretty close to the end, unless there's someone else here on my side. Did you have any other questions? Pardon? Go ahead, Mike.
And there's about 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Well, I'd love to have a follow-up from the commissioner with respect to what you think it would take to move forward on ensuring that the aspects that were mentioned in the task force and from the CCPA were part of the legislation. So in that same vein of let's move, like what could be done now, would there be anything that Commissioner DeMarco you'd want to share in terms of what you'd like to see from the government to follow through on substantial, prosperous transition legislation?
Yeah, we're seeing some signs of it in the comments from the witnesses today. The way I would put it is that there are opportunities associated with this shift. There isn't a fixed amount of fossil fuels that we need to source in perpetuity. Those need to come down, and other sources of energy are going to come up. So we need to have a new focus more on what doors are going to be opened in terms of a prosperous future, rather than just on limiting the damage from the doors that are being closed. So both sides of the coin. When one door closes, another door or several other doors need to open, and we need to focus on both aspects for a just transition.
Thank you very much. We are going to close it at that. I want to thank all our witnesses for appearing today. I apologize about some of the audio difficulties we had, but I appreciate your patience with that and working towards a solution. Just before I adjourn the meeting, just going to remind committee members that on Thursday, June 9th, we'll be studying 2 draft reports in camera. The report on the Public Accounts of Canada, as well as Report 13, Health and Safety of Agricultural Temporary Foreign Workers in Canada during the COVID-19 pandemic. And on that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all again. Have a good day.